Welcome to the Fight for Citizen podcast. I'm your host, Matone, Uncle Fox, and this episode was recorded on February 3rd, 2026 at the MMIP Conference in Sacramento, California. So you're about to hear is Lynette, a mother speaking about her son, Nicholas Robert Patterson, a Pit River man who went missing in January 2020, just before the COVID pandemic. Now, Lynette shares what happened in days leading up to Nick's disappearance, the confusion across counties, the search efforts, and the long road her family has been forced to walk since then. So this conversation is not speculation. It's a lived experience told by a mother who has carried this loss for years while navigating a system that often failed to respond to urgency. So we share this story to honor Nick, to carry his name, and to remind people that missing and murdered Indigenous people are not statistics. They are loved, they're remembered, and they matter. So I'm going to step back and now let Lynette speak.
Okay, so when I reported Nick missing, the last time when I filled out my report, we filled out two different reports on him. My mom and my older brother filed in Modoc County. I filed in Shasta County.
Okay.
Because I lived in Shasta County.
Yeah, so two counties you guys filed.
Yeah. So, and so the information on my missing persons report, when I filled out the report, so the dates are different because when I last seen him, it was on this, I want to say it was the second, it was the last time I seen him.
Okay.
But I talked to him on the 4th, and so that, when Mom seen him last, it would have been on the 4th or 5th. I can't remember exactly which date, but so that's where a lot of the confusion was.
Okay. So
because we were given different information about the last clothing he was seen in, because I gave him information about the clothes that I last seen him in, and then when Mom had when they gave in their report, it was clothing and the description of when they last seen him, and so that caused a lot of confusion. I didn't have running water at the time, and so he'd brought down a bunch of clothes, and he'd been there for a couple of days, and so he was wanting to go up and grab some more clothes and go take a shower, and then he was going to come right back.
Yeah.
And so when he took off, we'd been out wood cutting the day before the last time I'd seen him, and we went out and got a couple cords of wood, and he was outside helping me split the wood, and so I know we was all kind of tired, and so then I just asked him, I was like, hey son, I told you we'd take you up tonight, but can you just wait until tomorrow morning, and then we'll go up first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, no problem. Well, later on that evening, we're just sitting there, and I knew he was upset because he'd him and his girlfriend had this little she freaked out on him and broke his phone. And well, when I woke up the next morning and I go out in the living room and he's gone, and I was like, where'd he go?
Yeah.
And living 2 miles from Bernie there, his uncle lived in town. He has numerous he has a great uncle that lived there, a bunch of cousins, we're related to everybody. And so he said, and he was uneasy, and so when I woke up and seen him gone, it kind of concerned me, but it didn't, because I wasn't sure if because I live just right down the street from Chevron, and so I figured maybe he went up and grabbed some smokes or whatever.
Store.
At first I wasn't too alarmed, even though I was kind of wondering where he was. It wasn't until later on, that morning, I was like, okay, where's he at? But Nick was always really considerate about letting people know, where he was at. Just like, my mom, my sister said, he never went any longer than, at most 2, maybe the longest 3 days without contacting, one of the females in the family, or, he was always known to be around people.
Yeah.
You'd either hear from him or people would see him. And so it was really out of the ordinary when nobody heard from him. I knew that he didn't have his phone, and so I kind of let that go. I was like, he doesn't have his phone. Then my brother called me. He's like, okay, so we found him. He's out to his grandma's house, because his grandma is with my uncle. He's like, he's out to his grandma's house out on Day Road, out on the bench, and but he's fine. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, his grandma seen him walking,
Yeah.
And so she picked him up, and so then a day or two later, when he comes up, Mom calls me again and tells me, hey, did you come up and get him, or have you seen him, or I can't find him. She's like, he's more than likely just on his way back down to come see you.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really worry about it. I just was kind of waiting for him, to show up. And so when the second time, when everybody was looking for him, or when Mom had called us and let us know, I woke up this morning. Last time she'd seen him, but when she woke up again, there was still coals in the fireplace. He obviously had built her a fire or whatever, and she's like, he couldn't have been, it couldn't have been that long ago that he'd taken off, because there were still coals in the fire.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. She's like, but just her letting us know that that he was gone. So we waited a little while. We were out getting cinders for our driveway, and as soon as Mom called, my boyfriend at the time told me, "Hey, get in the truck. Let's go back to the house or the trailer or whatever." And so I'm sitting there waiting, and he just never shows up. And so then, I wasn't sure if he was going to come in to see me or if he was going to see the girl. And so I just kind of let it go. But we were all still in contact. Has anybody seen Nick? Has anybody seen Nick? Like, as days start to go by and everybody's getting more and more worried, everybody's, telling me, like, you need to go in and file, missing persons report, because we had heard stories about him being seen, by a certain person or out into this area. And my mom had confronted one of the people that, supposedly had seen him last. Just stories had changed. And so when the morning that I had planned on going in and filing, I was planning on calling in and filing the missing persons report, but my friend had came over and she was like, hey, I was out here in Hat Creek and I went out to go sell a bag, and freaking the person, that I was there to sell the bag to, he just kept shaking his head and was like visibly disturbed. And so I asked him what was going on, if there was anything I could help him with, and he just kept he wouldn't answer me. He was just like looking at the floor and just kept saying, like, mumbling over and over again, I can't believe my family would do something. I was like, what? I was like, I'm not gonna just call it in. I'm gonna go in and talk to the cops myself. And so I went outside and I told my boyfriend, I was like, hey, this is what's being said. They did something to my baby. Something's wrong.
Right.
And so I called my friend's mom. That way I had somebody, with me. We went in and filed a police report or the missing persons report. And I kept telling the officer that was taking the report, he didn't have a phone on him. Nobody's seen him. Nobody's heard from him. It's really it's out of character for him. And had told him, some things that he had told us about, people taking his money.
Yeah.
And that these people that we'd seen him, and they were just acting kind of strange, like something was up. The way I was trying to explain it to him, because I was worried about it, he just kind of, took the report, and then later on when I finally got the report in my hands, half the stuff I told him wasn't in the report, and so it was just checked as as a voluntary missing adult, and I was like, I don't know, just right then I was upset. Well, so the next day, and I'd given him all the information that we had up until that point. Right afterwards, I went over to his where his uncle stayed, his dad's brother, and because he was with one of my best friends, and I was telling him, I just got done filling out the missing persons report, and he was like, yeah, and I was like, well, he's like, and I told him the information I gave him. I was like, yeah, I told him about old girl saying that she was he'd been out in Hat Creek, and but he got picked up by some unknown vehicle and somebody they didn't know, and they didn't know where he was going. And he was like, really? He's like, because my dad went out there, to that place this morning, and the brother said that he was the last person to see Nick, and that the sister was out of town. And I was like, what? And so that just that alarmed me too. And I was like, they're switching up their stories already. Something's not right. And so I waited until the following day to let the police know, because I just got done telling Officer Tepley that this is what happened, and if he wasn't too concerned about it, I figured with this new information I'll wait until somebody's on next shift.
Yeah.
So when I called the next day, the person that I spoke to, Sergeant Sinclair, I was telling him, I came in and filled out this missing persons report on my son. This is the information I'd given him, and at the time that was the most recent information I had. But this is what I heard, from his uncle yesterday, that my uncle had went out there and started asking questions, and the story's already changed. And so he was like, well, we put a bolo out for him, and however, I've been on the force for 30 years. I know these people. I know how they are. And I'm going out, it's not just going to be on bolo side. I'm going out to ask questions. And he knows the demeanor of these people. He knows, their history. And so, that made me feel a little bit better, because it wasn't even 45 minutes later, I get a phone call from a friend telling me, they're like, hey, have you guys found Nick yet? I was like, no, why? Have you seen him? He was like, no, but I was just coming in, hit Four Corners, and there's 4 or 5 sheriff's rigs, and they're headed out towards Hat Creek. And I was like, well, right on. That means they're going to go look for him. They meant business. And so eventually, on their way back in, they stopped. The cops had stopped by and let me know that they went out there and was asking questions. I was like, okay, they didn't find him. Well, after that, the family was like, okay, we need to go out there and we need to start looking. Nick was a really generous person. He was just really trusting. He was overly trusting. He was
Who did you report it to first when he went first missing? What agency?
Shasta County Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
And actually they have it was the Bernie substation, because otherwise I would have had to go all the way to Redding. And from where we live, it's about an hour from where we live. I live about an hour from where my mom and Nick lived.
Okay.
And so it's where they lived is Modoc County. You got to go through Lassen County and then hit Shasta County. So it's just, the setup is like, that was a problem too with all of the, jurisdictions and everything, and just a lot of confusion because, they lived in this county, I lived in this county. I had to deal with these guys down here. And for the longest time, when Nick first went missing, like I said, both my mom and my brother had went and did their separate reports. There was 3 separate missing persons reports made. And basically my mom had said that, they were just wanting to do that, as maybe they would see like a cause of urgency. Maybe they would, respond a little bit quicker, or maybe they'd pay more attention, that way. And so, like I said, it was, but at the time, like I said, I was living in Shasta County. And so my brother and my older brother and my older cousin, like they were kind of the point of contacts for up there. I dealt with the cops in Shasta County. When they did the first couple searches, even though I wasn't actively at the searches.
Who was searching at the time?
The families.
Okay.
Yeah,
All families got together?
Yeah,
Okay.
the family initiated it.
Okay.
And that was another thing that, because I'd asked Shasta County, like, this is where we heard he was at, don't you guys have like dogs? Like, don't you guys have like dogs that do searching or can whatever? And they had told me that, well, at the 30-day mark, if you guys still haven't had any major leads or whatever, then you guys, then we'll bring the dogs out. And which it kind of tripped me out, because I'm like, like I said, isn't, like you see on, cop shows or on TV or in the movies, like it said, the first 48 hours.
Yeah, they got looked for. Yeah.
And like, just like I said, time's supposed to be of the essence, and like they're supposed to like respond like really quick. And so it kind of threw me off when they told me like at the 30-day mark, then you guys can use these dogs. And so I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and she called me. She's like, hey, I know you guys are going to do that search. If you want to have access to horses, that's cool. I appreciate that. But what I need is dogs.
Yeah.
And she was like, what? I said, I need cadaver dogs. She was like, she shows up and she brings these cadaver dogs. But it's like right before it's supposed to snow. And I want to say it was like later on that afternoon, or it might have been the next day that it actually did start snowing.
Okay.
And so, but she shows up with these dogs and they're out there, and like I'm on the phone trying to figure everything out, I'm waiting for this okay from my cousin to be able to go where we're looking. And it was kind of intense, but they said they didn't find him, out there. And so like automatically I'm supposed to know where to look at the next place, and because everybody's like, now what do we do? And like I said, the cops were, I appreciate that the cops were there, and I didn't get in trouble for not notifying them.
So when did they finally start to get involved in the search?
They just showed up.
Okay.
During the first search, and then when they did another search, the family had put together. Went out. Well, the law enforcement suggested that they'd look out on 89, like farther, like 44, 89 that way.
Okay.
And so all the families out there and looking, and Lassen County actually had jumped in, showed up, had their drones. Modoc County was there, and Shasta County showed up. Modoc County was out. Lassen showed up, and they had their drones, and like Lassen was even really involved, but because he had to hit when you go from where my mom lives up in, like, if you're going towards my house, you do pass through Lassen County, and just because Lassen County knew that he had passed through their county, they showed up. They were right there to help.
Yeah,
and that was, to me, that was awesome. In the meantime, we'd hired a private investigator, and the private investigator said, when they went out there, that they went out and looked around, they didn't really see anything, and so then in the meantime, I'm getting all this information because we put out the flyers, and I listed my number, if anybody has any information, contact me, my mother or my daughter. And so everybody's like calling me, hey, we heard this, or, and so my boyfriend at the time, his daughter had moved, all the way across the United States, and she had called her dad and said, hey, there was a fire out that way. And one of the people that we suspected had done something to Nick, his trailer had burned down, his camp trailer. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I called him, call law enforcement, like, hey, like, you guys didn't notice that this guy's trailer burnt down? Mm-hmm. Like, that didn't make you guys, like, suspect anything? It didn't look fishy or anything? Yeah. And they didn't really say anything, so when I called the private investigator and let him know, I was like, hey, he was like, the thing was still smoldering when we were out there. I was like, and you guys didn't, like, that didn't, like, spark any, like, kind of curiosity? Yeah. And he was like, yeah, a little. I was like, oh, my gosh. All right.
yeah.
Well, so then, and so like there was all these like major things, and because they were telling us that that Nick's case was the one that was at the top of the list, and they had all these leads, and when I did when I did request records from them, because I know that because I filed the missing persons report, I could get a copy of that.
Yeah.
Well, Modoc County had told me that their sheriff up there had told me that they were having a lot of problems with receiving records, Shasta County's records.
Okay.
And I was like, "What do you mean problems?" He's like, "We can't get the records." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "Yeah." He's all, "We've put in emails and phone calls, and they're not responding." I was like, "You guys are just gonna let them do that?" Like,
yeah.
And so I told him that about my intention of trying to get a copy of the missing persons report that I filed, and I said, "Well, if they give that to me, I'll see how that goes. If they give that to me, then I'll mention to them, hey, what about these guys? They're requesting, their official records and their law enforcement, we'll see how this goes, and then I'll get a hold of you." Well, when I checked my email, because I did it, I had them send it through my email. When I opened my email on the 10th day, I see there's two separate files in there, and so I click on the first one, and it's a copy of the missing persons report that I filed, and then the second one I click on is the whole case file. The whole case that they had closed in Shasta County, and I was like, "What the hell?" And so I called, Amanda, our MMIP coordinator. I'm like, "I need to write Alters right now." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I got the report back." She's like, "Oh, you did write on?" She's like, "What's it look like?" I said, "I need a write Alters right now." She's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm not sure what the deal is," I said, "but I got the whole, like, everything that Modoc County has been after." She's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." I said, "So we're gonna hand carry these to the good old sheriff." And she was like, "Okay." So we did. We go up there, and he just happened to be in the front office at the time when we walked in, and I had I could have just sent it over the phone or whatever, but I showed him on my phone. I was like, "Hey, Tex, I got that missing persons report and the copy of the report." And he was like, "Oh, really?" And so I told him, I gave him a copy. I said, "Oh," and I said, "Is this what you were after? Is this the information you were after?" And I showed him what was on my phone. He just kind of looked at me. He was like, "How did you get this? Where did you get this?"
He's surprised you had it.
Yeah. I said, "But is that what you were after?" He was like, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, just records request." And he's like, "Well, I need that." So I was like, "All right," and I sent it to him.
And then when it came to like, after all that, how did they actually find a location? I mean, was it a tip or?
It was. I'm not sure if it was a ranch. It had to have been a ranch worker, actually, because they didn't really let us know too much either. They just said that it was somebody that had just kind of stumbled upon it or whatever.
Stumbled on his remains.
Yeah. So they just kind of stumbled upon it. And
that was in 2024 or 25?
Yeah, 2024.
Okay.
And so they called it in, and they went down and picked it up. And so, or picked up the skull, and then I think they said the next day they went down, because it was, like I said, end of April, and about...
How far is that from like where the last time like you saw him? Or
okay, so from my mom's house, where it's at, it's kind of strange how it looks, because when we were told that it was in real close proximity to his grandma's house, it is. If you look on a map, however, the road that goes...
Like he tried to cut through, maybe?
Yeah, and that's exactly what they tried to say, well, maybe he just tried to take a shortcut. Okay, I appreciate your guys' theory about he probably froze to death, and maybe he tried to take the shortcut. However, there's a couple things that, what kind of evidence do you have to support your theory?
I'm not going to take a shortcut.
Exactly.
Because of it,
especially during the wintertime.
In dogs, wintertime.
And see, Nick wasn't a person that would, he wasn't one to go traipsing through people's property.
Yeah, because I'm going to walk the road because I might get picked up.
Yeah, and that's it, too.
Yeah.
And, and he would have had to go over fences.
No.
Or go through, like, fields.
Yeah.
Cross the river.
Yeah.
And, like, that. Nick wasn't that kind of person. And even if he was out walking, like they're trying to say, maybe he walked here, somebody would have seen him.
Yeah.
Somebody would have seen him, and they would have recognized him, and they would have given him a ride.
Right. How did they identify the remains to say that it was
Okay,
Nick?
so they identified the skull through his dental records.
Okay.
The humerus bone they identified through DNA, and so
Okay.
I had to wait for a while on that. Like, a lot of people ask me, how do you do it? How do you handle this? Okay, first of all, you just have to be, in that position. This is my kid, my firstborn child, my only son. I was always taught, pray protection over your kids or whatever. And when Nick was little, I had him dedicated, both him and my daughter, the same day. And like I said, Nick, he wasn't a troublemaker or whatever, you know. In my eyes, Nick didn't deserve whatever he got.
Yeah.
He was dedicated. He did this. He wasn't a violent person. And like I said, you got to be really careful what you pray for, because, you know, I prayed that, you know, just to be there with Nick, protect him, and just make sure that he's never, like, make sure that nobody can hurt him again.
Yeah.
And then he's gone.
Yeah.
You know, I never foreseen any of this.
Right.
Any of it. And like I said, and like that eats at me all the time. Any parent or like anybody in like a situation where something like that happens, you know, you just and I try not to do that a lot. You know, I try to not let myself, you know, because you'll sit there and you'll think of things, you know, how come I didn't do this? How come I didn't do that? And so then I have this happen to my oldest child, and then here I have to watch my other child like hurt more than she's ever hurt in her life, and like, and there's nothing really I can do about it. And so a lot of people say, how do you do it? How do you do it? Well, I'll tell them, you know, a lot of it's, you know, I don't pray for myself a lot, but that's where other people's prayers come in.
Did you know, like, with him passing like that, or, you know, that going on, that it was a big part of the MMIP crisis that was going on at the time? Or
Actually,
you
know,
realize
and
until
I
later?
was telling everybody, I've mentioned it before, when Nick first went missing in 2020, you know, MMIW was just getting their own recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I didn't realize what a crisis it was.
Mm-hmm.
It had to hit home for me to like really
Yeah.
open my eyes to everything, like trying to look, you know, for resources or whatever. Like I said, they were just getting their recognition,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed there was nothing out there for them, and that's, you know, that's why this was his first rally shirt. That's why, you know,
Yeah.
I tried to focus on the men, because like there wasn't really a bunch out there for the men,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why when we advocated for Nick, you know, we tried to advocate as hard as we did, you know, for men.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he was when Sovereign Bodies Institute and the Yurok Tribe, when they did their couple year project, their I Will See You Again in a Good Way, that that whole thing, they'd mentioned Nick because of everybody advocating so hard for him. They included him in their first year progress report.
Oh, wow.
And so like I said, you know, they included that part, and when I'd seen that they included him, I was like, you know, right on, that's cool. You know, they mentioned him, and so the following year in their year 2 progress report, like I said, that was, to me, that was huge, because before, you know, they wasn't even after data collection for it, and like I didn't realize, like, when actually both progress reports were really well written, and like I said, the work that Anita did in establishing all that was amazing. And like I said, there's been things said and done in his name, like at that point in time, like I was really frustrated because it seemed like there was nothing happening.
Right.
But then when I found, you know, when I'd seen these and I was reading it, I was like, you know, and like, I don't like to see my son's, you know, face and like all this, but at the same time, you know, it's
awareness, like, too.
Yeah, like I said, you know, it's awareness, and like he didn't die in vain. Like there's stuff still being done in his name.
Right.
And so, like, you know, like when we did his first rally, it wasn't us that put it together. It was actually Jesse Armstrong. At the time, you know, he was, you know, doing a lot of advocating for, you know, MMIW, and he helped me out with that, you know, help put on the first rally. You know, Indigenous Justice was there too, and like I said, that we had a lot of support for that. Had Jesse not been there to help me, you know, help put together that first one, we wouldn't have done the second one. Yeah. And we wouldn't have done, you know, so just him being there, you know, to help me with that. Like then we was able to do the pro walk. You know, there's where we advocate not just for Nick, you know, we advocate for everybody. And like I said, I've had a lot of help in finding help with Nick. There's been, like I said, there was a lot of resources that weren't there back in 2020. MMIP's come a long way since 2020, and
it's out there and really out there to help you.
And like I said, you know, a lot of the resources that we didn't have available to us, you know, I try to utilize as many resources as I have available to me, because when on stage earlier, you know, a lot of the stories, you know, they're talking about what wasn't done for them, or you know, people that aren't helping or whatever. And like I went through similar situations, but like this is the people that helped me. This is how far I gotten. And you know, I had Mary up there because she was, you know, the first director. Isaac was supposed to be up there with me, but like I said, you know, I've kind of kept them informed, even though they're not in the positions, like kind of kept them informed of just how things are going, you know, along the way. And they've continued to help me. Like I said, you know, I've had a lot of support, and that's why I just wanted families to know too, like, hey, check, there is help out there. You know, you might not know where to find it, but that's where, you know, that's where these summits come in, like really handy.
Is there anything since the last year? Is there anything new that's come up about your son? Like any kind of leads or any kind of?
They lost his vertebrae, and I never would have known they were missing Had
Yeah.
I not went to go put a beanie on, because he always wore a beanie. I didn't have the rest of the body to, clothe
Yeah.
or whatever. So we just bought him a beanie, and I went to go put it on his head. And like when the mortician had opened up the little box that we'd had made for the casket or whatever, I went to go put, because he asked me if I wanted to do it or if he wanted me, or if I wanted him to do it. And I was like, well, I wasn't really sure how I was going to be able to take that to just see my son's skull. We'd done an appointment with the mortician like earlier that week, and like I got to hold him in the box. That was something I never thought I'd ever be able to do again, was hold my boy, and I got to hold him. And but at the same time, I'm sitting there telling myself, be grateful for this. Be grateful for this, because there's a lot of families out there that don't get this much.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was able to take him home and bury him. He's back, on his 40. My brother passed away the same year that Nick disappeared, a couple days before my birthday. And so he's laid to rest, right by his uncle, and like he's back at home. Because everybody, when we had his services, everybody's like, well, the family finally has closure. Because when we had posted the flyer for his search after we'd had the services, everybody was like, well, I thought you guys found him.
You found him, so it should be over. That's what everybody's thinking.
Yeah, and I was like, because like when they first had told me about these remains being found, I was like, okay, like I said, I wanted to notify his dad first, and then I was going to notify the family. But here I have this. I had posted his flyer, and so then I had to repost. I was like, so I guess it's time to clear up some of the confusion, since I'm getting messages and people are asking. Yes, we did lay my son to rest on 5/17/2025. We buried some of the remains that were found 4/24/24, and were positively identified as belonging to Nick. It was only a skull and a humerus bone. There were 2 vertebrae found during a search that was held a few months later. Modoc County Sheriff Tex Dowdy said that once the weather got better, that we would go and search to see if we could find more. Traditionally, our people are supposed to be buried as quick as possible, so as soon as I was notified that I could have his remains, I wanted to lay what we had of him to rest. I'm super grateful for the chance to go and search for more of the remains in hopes that we will find more of my son. It's kind of unsettling to know that there's more of him out there somewhere. This is the reason why I'm asking for everyone to please come help us with the search. I was trying to protect Nick's family from all of the questions that I knew they would be asked if the public knew the details. This whole ordeal has been traumatic enough without all the morbid details that I felt the general public really didn't need to know at the time. That's why it was my decision to hold off on the news release. So when you heard that from the media, that it was my decision, it was my decision alone in doing so. Nick's family needed time to try and process all of this information without being bombarded with all kinds of questions. Thank you for understanding this. And I really did feel at the time, it was nobody's. It was the day of his wake when I found out these things were gone. I didn't even tell all of my family or all of his family, the day of his services, and like I said, it just, everybody just expects, okay, well, we had the services, everything should be better now. There's just been one thing right after another. And so,
because natives think that if the whole body's not together, then he's not really truly arrested.
And that was my thing. And like for a long time too, I was worried, about him, like the things that we couldn't do for him. Like I was concerned about maybe he's stuck somewhere. Like if he can't leave here and he's not all the way to where he's at, like it was bad enough that I had to hear all this, stuff had happened to him. But in my head, as a mom, you want to know that, he's in a better place, that they say he's in a better place. I was just worried, like, what if he's stuck in between these places? Like,
because he's incomplete.
Not, and it's, how they always tell you, to not be caught in your grief or whatever, because you be holding him back. Yeah. And for a long time, I was trying to get over it myself, but at the same time, I'm like, just, because I miss my son, but I don't, I have to look at that part too. I don't want him stuck in between. I don't want to be holding him back. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I don't know, because there's a long time, everybody's like, oh, if there's one thing you could have, I want my son back. They might have taken him from me in this world. Yeah. As long as I do things the right way. Yeah. Like try to live, the best life I can or whatever. The next time I see him again, nobody's gonna ever be able to take him away from me again. Yeah, yeah. And Nick was always happy to see me, regardless of what shape I was in, what shape he was in. He always had a big smile. He's always had a big hug. Yeah. The next time I see him, I want him to still be happy to see me. Yeah. I don't want him to be like, just, like, wow, Mom. Like, I want him to be happy. Like, I want him to be able to tell me, hey, Mom, I'm proud of you. Like, I knew that you could get through this. I knew you'd be able to do this. And I don't want to. There's been times like I've been discouraged where
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like I don't want to be here anymore. Because like beforehand, I wasn't really scared of dying, but it was just after he was gone, it's something I don't really worry about so much anymore because I want to see my baby again. I still have a daughter out here. He's got his nephew that's named after him. He's still got family out here that like I said, I want to make sure that I'm there for them. I don't like, even if it is just as support or whatever. I want him.
Yeah.
I don't want him to be bummed out at me. I'm like, man, mom, like. Because he tried to help as many people as he could. He was always there especially for his sister and his grandmas.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I'm not letting him down.
Yeah.
Or like I said, when the next time I see him, it's if I do things right. Like I said, he might not be here right now, but like you guys didn't. He's not going to be forgotten. It's not something that's forgotten. It's not something that's going to get swept under the rug.
Yeah. So you've been listening to Lynette, the mother of Nicholas Robert Patterson, a Pitt River man who went missing in January 2020. So throughout this episode, Lynette speaks not only about the loss of her son, but how his name continues to be carried through the MMIP movement, so that what happens to Nick is not forgotten, and so that other families may not have to walk this path alone. I want to thank Lynette for her courage and resiliency in speaking out and fighting not only for her son, but for others who are still missing and whose cases remain unresolved. I have a lot of respect for these families who continue to speak the names of their loved ones, because as Native people, it can be very difficult to talk about those who are no longer with us. So I want to thank Lynette and her family for standing strong for Nick and for being part of this MMIP movement. Lynette also mentioned principles she carries forward in her son's name. She plans to share those in writing, and when she's ready, we'll honor her words and share them as well on here. So if you'd like to hear more about who Nick was as a person, his grandmother also spoke about him in episode 28 from last year on this podcast. So if you have any information related to this case, please contact the Modoc County authorities. Thank you for listening and for helping carry Nick's name forward, and Nick is not forgotten. Blessings and healings to all the families who continue to search for their loved ones.
Thank you all for tuning in to the Fight for Existence podcast. If you guys want to keep up with the podcast in general, what you could do is follow the social media account. The Instagram account is going to be Fight for Our Existence. Again, that's Fight number 4 Our Existence. Go ahead and give that a follow. And if you guys have any questions for us, or you guys would like to be on the podcast, in the Instagram there's a link. Go ahead and click that. No matter what kind of platform you guys are listening to this podcast on, there's always that plus or that follow button. So go ahead and click that so you guys can get notifications when we upload our next episode. And if you guys are listening on Spotify, what you could do is go ahead and rate the show. And if you guys are only listening on Apple Podcasts, what you can also do is write a review for the show. Thank you all for tuning in to the Fight for Existence podcast, and we will talk to you next time.